Hi everyone, welcome to my green closet. So today I am super excited to have a DIY video for you. And I'm not only going to show you how to sew this very simple gathered skirt, but I'm also going to show you how to naturally dye with rusted metal. I will have time codes down below if you're interested in one part or the other, and let's jump right into it. So before making our skirt, we have to take some measurements. So the first measurement we're going to take is our waist, and then we're going to times this by at least 2 to 3 times. You can go for 2 if you want it to be a little less gathered, or 3 if you want quite a bit of volume. I did 3 times my waist measurement. And if you want to know how to properly measure yourself, I will link a video about that. Then you need to decide how long you want your skirt, and you want to measure that from where you took your waist measurement. Now, of course, it can be kind of hard to see the measuring tape, so if you don't have anyone else to help you, I find holding it against my leg so that you can then bend over works okay. Now, if you are doing a very long or maxi length skirt, you want to make sure that there's plenty of room for you to walk. So I would recommend taking a large step and measuring that and making sure it's quite a bit larger than that. So for my skirt, I'm actually using an old bed sheet, and I would recommend any kind of lightweight woven fabric. And I had enough fabric to be able to fold it in half and cut out my full 3 times waist measurement. But if you don't have a long enough piece of fabric, you can also cut out 2 rectangles. So you take your multiplied waist measurement and use half of that for each rectangle. And you also want to add some seam allowance. So I did a 1 centimeter seam allowance on here. And because I just had 1 seam, I did 1 times 2. But if you have 2 rectangles of fabric, then you want to add 4 times your seam allowance. And then for the length of your skirt and the shorter side of your rectangle, you're going to want to add at least 6 inches or 7.5 centimeters to the length that you measured on yourself. And then you can cut that out, or I like to just rip the fabric with wovens. Then we're going to put the right or the outside of the fabric facing together and sew up the side seams. So basically we want to sew a giant tube. Then we want to create the hole for our elastic to go through. Properly ironing or pressing your fabric makes sewing so much easier. So first I'm folding over the edge about 1 centimeter and pressing that down. Then we're going to fold it over again to create the space for the elastic. So you want to make sure this is bigger than the elastic you're using. And I think a good size elastic for this project is something that's about 2 centimeters or 3/4 of an inch wide. So you want the next fold to be about 1/2 to a full centimeter wider than your elastic. And then we're going to press that down as well. And I find these little metal hem gauges really useful. They're definitely not necessary, but you don't have to worry about melting a plastic ruler with your iron. So then we're going to sew that up, and you want to try to stitch as close as you can to the edge, maybe a couple millimeters in. And if you're new to sewing, definitely go slow. Now you want to be careful not to sew the entire way around, so leave about a 5 centimeter hole that we can put the elastic through. So then you have to determine how big you want your elastic. Comfortably fitted to your body, but not at all tight is a good length. And you want it to overlap about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. So then I'm putting a safety pin through the end, which just helps with feeding it through. And this takes a while, but you just want to slowly get that elastic through the little tunnel you made. But make sure not to lose the other end in it. Then when you've gotten all the way around, you can pin it together and try it on to make sure that it fits well. Next, we need to sew the elastics together, and you want this to be really secure. So I recommend stitching a square around where they overlap with a line across. And then I'm just clipping any loose threads. Now the elastic might fold or twist inside the skirt, so if you want to avoid that, you could tack it around the skirt, but it's not necessary. And then I'm just sewing up the little hole that we had open. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the bottom for the hem, but we're going to sew all the way around and not put an elastic through. And then that's it. It's a super simple gathered skirt tutorial. It doesn't require any patterns, and it's an easy way to make something that you can pretty quickly wear. So then, because this was just a plain white skirt, I wanted to do something fun with it. And my first idea was to actually do some solar dyeing with eucalyptus leaves because I had some leftover dried eucalyptus leaves. And solar dyeing just involves putting the plant material all over the fabric, adding it to a jar with water, and letting it sit out in the sun for weeks or as long as you can. Now this unfortunately didn't work out very well for me. Eucalyptus leaves often do dye fabric pretty well, but I think the ones I was using were just too old. So I'd collected a bunch of rusty things when we tore down our very old garage. I fed the skirt through any bolts or washers and put all these rusty things all over the skirt and bundled it up. Then I put it back in the jar, but this time with some water and some vinegar. Now I only let this sit for a few days because I just wanted to get some of the iron dye out of it. But the rust dyeing actually needs air and oxygen to work. Now you do want to be careful, obviously, using sharp things like nails, that it doesn't poke through the fabric or you don't hurt yourself. And we can already see a bunch of black spots and patterns from the iron. So after I took it out, I started rubbing kind of the pieces over the skirt to get a bit more of the metal and rust. And then I relayed out the pieces in spots that were kind of blank and bunched it up together. And then I let this slowly dry outside because that's where the rust color is really going to develop. So here's all the rust prints and patterns after drying. And then finally, here's the finished skirt after I have rinsed it all out and ironed it. Now this was totally experimental and I had no idea how it was going to turn out, but I really like some of the designs and prints from the rusty metal. It's definitely a unique piece. And the thing I really love about natural dyeing is if I get bored of it or want to change it up, I can dye with flowers or leaves or over dye the whole piece in a color if I want less of a pattern to it. But right now this feels perfect for autumn and it was really fun and easy to make. If you are natural dyeing, especially as a beginner, I think it's really good to approach it with an open, experimental mind because there are a lot of different variables. So if you're looking for a very specific result, it can be very difficult. So I think it's better to just have fun and see what happens. And often it's a very pleasant surprise. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed both of these tutorials. It's been so long since I've done a video like this, and I'm really hoping to do more sewing. I'd love to hear if there's any other kind of sewing or dyeing tutorials you're interested in the comments. And if you try making the skirt or rust dyeing or both, please tag me. I would love to see them. Thank you for watching and thank you so much to those of you supporting me on Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one.